A human boy inherits a powerful alien wife, against her will, reaches its dramatic peak when rebels attack the Imperial Spire to free Rivanna by killing Jace. In a stunning reversal, Jace offers his own life to save her, while Rivanna chooses mercy over violence, refusing to kill the rebel leader, demonstrating that their forced bond has transformed into genuine respect and partnership. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The red dust of Iridius A6 swirled against the viewport as Jace Rowan tightened the last bolt on the fusion drill. His nimble fingers, calloused from years of mechanical work, moved with practiced precision despite the blistering heat of the mining colony's third-level tunnels. "That should hold," he muttered to himself, wiping sweat from his brow with a grimy forearm. At 17, Jace had already earned a reputation as the best drill technician in the Eastern Quadrant. Not that it meant much on a forgotten rock like Iridius 6. Jace packed his tools with methodical care. Each wrench and plasma cutter had been his father's before the tunnel collapse 3 years ago had claimed both his parents. The colony administration had offered perfunctory condolences, then promptly assigned Jace his parents' quarters and job responsibilities. Life on the frontier didn't allow for extended mourning. The comlink on his wrist chirped. "Rowan, you finished with Drill 7 yet?" The voice belonged to Foreman Dax, perpetually impatient and chronically unimpressed with anything that wasn't increasing the colony's mineral quotas. "Just wrapping up, sir. The thermal regulator was shot, but I salvaged parts from the decommissioned unit in Sector 4. A grunt came through the speaker. "Whatever. Just get it running. The administrator wants this tunnel producing by tomorrow's shift." Jace allowed himself a small sigh after the comlink went silent. Another day. Another broken machine fixed with improvised parts and sheer determination. He'd been doing this since he was 14, and would likely still be doing it at 40 if he stayed on Iridius 6. The thought settled on his shoulders, like the ever-present red dust. As he made his way through the winding tunnels toward the surface, Jace passed other miners and technicians, exchanging brief nods. Most were decades older, their skin weathered by the harsh conditions and their eyes dulled by the monotony. But Jace's remained bright, still holding on to the dreams his parents had nurtured in him, dreams of the stars, of distant worlds, of something more than dust and drills. The living quarters were Spartan, functional modules arranged in concentric circles around the colony's central administrative hub. Jace's small unit was on the outer ring, as befitted his low status. He palmed the entry scanner, and the door slid open with a familiar wheeze of hydraulics. Inside, he headed straight for the tiny refresher unit, shedding his work clothes as he went. The water ration was barely enough to rinse away the worst of the grime, but he'd long ago mastered the art of the 3-minute shower. Clean, and dressed in his only other set of clothes, Jace settled at his workbench, a repurposed cargo container lid, propped on storage crates. Here, surrounded by salvaged components and technical manuals, was where he felt most at home. He was tinkering with a small communication booster he'd been building from scrap, hoping to improve the range enough to pick up transmissions from passing trade ships. Maybe one day he'd hear of an opportunity, a way off this rock. The sudden blare of the colony's emergency siren jerked him from his concentration. Jace's heart raced. Emergency alerts usually meant tunnel collapses or atmospheric breaches, neither of which ended well for those involved. He rushed to the window, expecting to see colonists running for shelter. Instead, he found them standing in clusters, pointing skyward. Following their gaze, he saw it, a sleek, silver craft unlike the utilitarian transport vessels that occasionally visited the colony. This ship gleamed like polished chrome, its design elegant and alien, with sweeping curves that seemed to capture and reflect the dying light of Iridia's distant sun. An imperial vessel. They were rare enough in the core systems, and practically unheard of this far out on the frontier. The colony's public address system crackled to life. "Attention all residents. This is Administrator Vin. We have received communication from an Imperial envoy ship requesting the presence of... There was a pause, as if the administrator couldn't quite believe what he was reading. Requesting the presence of Resident Jace Rowan at the administrative center immediately. This is not a drill. Jace froze, his name echoing in his ears. Imperial envoys didn't cross half the galaxy to speak with teenage drill technicians. There had to be some mistake. By the time he reached the administrative center, a small crowd had gathered. They parted silently as he approached, their faces a mixture of curiosity and unease. The colony's security detail, 2 bored guards usually tasked with breaking up the occasional drunken dispute, stood at rigid attention by the entrance. Inside, Administrator Vin was speaking with what appeared to be a holographic projection of a humanoid figure, its form translucent and tinged with blue light. As Jace entered, both turned to face him. "Ah, here he is," Vin said, his voice strained with forced pleasantry. "Jace Rowan, as requested." The hologram stepped forward, and Jace could now see it was a sophisticated AI interface, designed to approximate human features while remaining distinctly artificial. It wore what appeared to be a formal Imperial uniform, complete with insignia that Jace had only seen in educational broadcasts. Identification: Jace Rowan, son of engineers Marcus and Alara Rowan. The AI's voice was smooth, emotionless. Jace swallowed hard. "Yes, that's me." The AI's eyes, if they could be called that, seemed to scan him. "Genetic confirmation will be required, but preliminary facial recognition suggests a 94.7% match with House Levian markers." "House Levian?" Jace echoed, confusion evident in his voice. "I don't understand." The AI's form shimmered slightly as it retrieved data. "House Levian, human noble lineage with Imperial standing, dating back to the 3rd expansion. Current status: dormant, pending succession claim. Your maternal great-grandfather, Lord Atticus Levian, registered a genetic inheritance protocol before his death." Jace looked to Administrator Vin, hoping for some clarification, but the man seemed as bewildered as he was. "I think there's been a mistake," Jace said. "My mother was an engineer, not some noble. Alara Rowan, born Alara Vision, daughter of Serena Levian, daughter of Lord Atticus Levian." The AI recited, "Genetic lineage confirmed through Imperial archives. The succession protocol was activated upon detection of your 18th proximity, which occurs in 17 standard days." Jace's mind reeled. His mother had never mentioned any noble connections. Then again, she had spoken little of her life before the colonies. "What does this protocol mean exactly?" he managed to ask. The AI's expression remained impassive. "You are required to present yourself at the Imperial Court on Aurelian Prime for genetic confirmation and to claim your seat among the 12 houses. Transport has been arranged. You will depart immediately." "Immediately?" Jace's voice rose. "I can't just leave. I have responsibilities here and—" "Your colonial contract is hereby superseded by Imperial decree." The AI interrupted. "Administrator Vin has been compensated for the loss of your services." Jace turned to Vin, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It's true, Jace. The Empire has transferred quite a generous sum to the colony's accounts. More than enough to replace you." Replaced, like a worn-out drill bit. Jace felt a flare of anger, but it quickly gave way to confusion as the AI continued. "The succession includes all titles, properties, and contractual obligations of House Levian, including the consort bond." "The what?" Jace asked, certain he'd misheard. "The consort bond, a political alliance secured through matrimony between House Levian and the Zelothi Imperium, established 3 generations prior. The current bound individual is Commander Rivana of the 3rd Zelothi Fleet, currently in stasis pending your claim." The room seemed to tilt around Jace. "You're saying I'm married?" To someone I've never met? Some alien commander? Not yet, the AI clarified. The bond will be formalized upon your arrival and genetic confirmation. Refusal is not an option under Imperial law. The ship awaits. Jace Rowan. You have 1 standard hour to gather personal belongings. With that, the hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving Jace standing in stunned silence. Administrator Vin cleared his throat. Well, Jace, it seems congratulations are in order. From drill technician to Imperial noble in 1 day. Quite the promotion. His attempt at humor fell flat. Jace barely heard him. His mind was racing, trying to process everything. A noble lineage. A seat among the 12 houses. A forced marriage to an alien commander. It was too much. I need to think, he muttered, turning toward the door. 1 hour, Jace, Vin called after him. The Empire doesn't like to be kept waiting. The walk back to his quarters passed in a blur. Colonists stared and whispered as he passed. News of the Imperial summons already spreading through the small community. Some looked envious, others suspicious, but none approached him. Perhaps they already saw him as something other than the Jace Rowan they'd known, no longer one of them. In his quarters, Jace sat heavily on his bed, head in his hands. His life, humble as it was, had at least been his own. Now, some distant ancestor's arrangement was hijacking his future. He thought about running, hiding in the abandoned tunnels until the Imperial ship left. But then what? The Empire's reach was vast, and he'd be a fugitive. No, running wasn't an option. His eyes fell on his workbench. The half-finished projects, the tools, the small holoframe with an image of his parents. These meager possessions were all he had to show for 17 years of life. Maybe this bizarre turn of events was the opportunity he'd been waiting for. A way off Iridia 6. A chance to see the stars up close. But a forced marriage? To a Zolothi commander, no less. Jace knew little about the Zolothi beyond what he'd seen in educational broadcasts. A proud warrior culture, humanoid, but distinctly alien with their crystalline-hued skin and formidable reputation. The thought of being bound to one for life made his stomach churn. Still, what choice did he have? With a deep breath, Jace began to pack. His tools went first, practical items that had defined his existence until now. Then the holoframe of his parents, which he carefully wrapped in his spare workshirt. He hesitated over the communication booster he'd been building, then added it to his small bag. Perhaps, wherever he was going, he'd still need a connection to what he was leaving behind. The hour passed quickly, and when a chime at his door announced the arrival of his escort, Jace was ready, at least outwardly. 2 Imperial guards, their armor gleaming even in the dull light of the colony corridor, flanked him as he made his way to the landing pad where the ship waited. A small crowd had gathered to witness his departure. Foreman Dax nodded gruffly as he passed. A few of the younger technicians he'd worked alongside called out awkward well wishes. No one seemed to know quite what to say to a boy who was leaving to become a noble and an alien's husband. The ship's entry ramp lowered as he approached. The AI envoy stood at the top, its holographic form now anchored to a mobile platform. Your belongings will be scanned and stowed, it informed him as he reached the ramp. Please proceed to the passenger quarters. Jace looked back one last time at the dusty collection of modules and tunnels that had been his home. The twin moons of Iridia 6 were rising, casting long shadows across the red landscape. It wasn't much, but it was familiar. Everything that awaited him was unknown. With a silent goodbye, he turned and ascended the ramp into his new life. The ship's interior was unlike anything Jace had ever seen. Where colonial vessels were utilitarian, with exposed conduits and minimal comforts, this craft was a testament to Imperial engineering and aesthetics. Smooth, curved walls in muted silver housed hidden systems. Soft, ambient lighting adjusted automatically as he moved through the corridors. The air itself seemed fresher, tinged with a subtle fragrance he couldn't identify. The AI led him to a chamber that, to his amazement, was larger than his entire living quarters on Iridia 6. A bed. A real bed. Not the narrow bunk he was accustomed to. Dominated one wall. Across from it, a viewport currently showed the red surface of the colony growing smaller as they ascended. "These are your accommodations for the journey," the AI informed him. "Estimated travel time to Aurelian Prime is 14 standard days. Nutritional requirements, hygiene facilities, and entertainment modules are available for your use. You may address me as Axis 7 if you require assistance." Jace set his bag down carefully. "Thank you, Axis 7. I have questions." "That is to be expected." The AI's expression remained neutral, but its tone suggested this was a standard response. "I am programmed to provide information relevant to your transition. This House Levian, my supposed family. Why haven't I heard of them before? Why didn't my mother ever mention this?" Axis 7's form shimmered slightly as it accessed data. House Levian was one of the original human noble houses that established diplomatic relations with non-terrestrial governments. Your great-grandfather, Lord Atticus, was a key negotiator in the human Zolothi Accords that ended the border conflicts 3 generations ago. The marriage alliance with the Zolothi was part of those accords. But why didn't my mother claim her position? Why live as a colony engineer if she was nobility? Sarina Levian, your grandmother, chose exile after a political disagreement with the Imperial Council. Your mother, Alara, was raised without knowledge of her heritage for her protection. Records indicate she discovered her lineage shortly before her marriage to your father, but chose to maintain her anonymity. The succession protocol was designed to activate only when the bloodline was in danger of extinction. Jace absorbed this information slowly. It painted his mother in a new light. Not just the practical, loving parent he remembered, but a woman with secrets, with a past she'd chosen to leave behind. "And this, Commander Rivana, the person I'm supposed to marry?" For the first time, Axis 7 hesitated. Commander Rivana of the 3rd Zolothi Fleet is a distinguished military leader among her people. She has served with honor in 3 border campaigns and currently holds advisory status to the Zolothi High Command. "That doesn't tell me much about her as a person," Jace pointed out. "Personal data is limited in Imperial archives. However," the AI's form shifted, and suddenly the chamber was filled with a 3-dimensional holographic projection. Jace's breath caught in his throat. Standing before him, or at least the image of her, was the most intimidating figure he had ever seen. Commander Rivana stood at least a head taller than him, her posture rigidly martial. Her skin had the characteristic crystalline quality of the Zolothi, with a blue-violet hue that seemed to shift with the light. Sharp, angular features framed eyes that glowed with an inner light. Beautiful, but utterly alien. Her hair, if it could be called that, resembled fine silver filaments that moved with an almost liquid quality. But it was her expression that struck Jace most forcefully, cold, imperious, and unmistakably displeased. "This recording was made upon her placement in stasis," Axis 7 explained. "Commander Rivana was informed that her service to the Zolothi Imperium required her to honor the consort bond with the next heir of House Levian." "She doesn't look happy about it," Jace observed, his stomach sinking. "Zolothi cultural norms place high value on self-determination and earned status. Political marriages are not aligned with their traditional values. So she's being forced into this too," Jace said quietly, studying the hologram. "Does she know anything about me?" She was informed that the heir was undetermined at the time of her stasis. She has been in suspended animation for approximately 3 standard years, awaiting the activation of the succession protocol. Jace ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit. "So neither of us wants this. Want is irrelevant under Imperial succession law," Axis 7 stated matter-of-factly. The consort bond was established as a cornerstone of human-Zolothi relations. Its maintenance is considered essential to continued peaceful cooperation between our species. Great, Jace muttered. Galactic peace depends on me marrying someone who looks like she'd rather disintegrate me than speak to me. The hologram of Ravana continued to stare imperiously across the chamber, her alien features unreadable, yet somehow conveying absolute disdain. Jace wondered what she would think when she awakened to find herself bound to a 17-year-old human drill technician from a backwater mining colony. Nothing good, he suspected. The journey will allow you time to prepare, X-SciFi said, dismissing the hologram. Imperial protocol dictates that you receive instruction in court etiquette, House Levian history, and basic Zolothi cultural practices before arrival. 14 days to learn how to be a noble and a husband to an alien warrior, Jace said with a humorless laugh. Should be simple. Your sarcasm is noted but unnecessary, X-SciFi responded. Rest now. Instruction begins at ship's dawn. With that, the AI's holographic form dissolved, leaving Jace alone in the luxurious chamber that suddenly felt very empty and very far from home. As the ship accelerated away from Iridia's 6, entering the shimmering hyperspace corridor that would carry him across the galaxy, Jace stood at the viewport, watching the stars blur into streaks of light. Somewhere ahead lay Aurelian Prime, the Imperial capital, and Commander Ravana, his unwilling bride-to-be. Whatever awaited him there, he was certain of one thing: life as he knew it was over. The 14-day journey passed in a blur of intensive instruction. Each morning, Jace awoke to X-SciFi's precise voice announcing the day's schedule. Meals, real food, not the protein concentrates of the colony, were delivered by automated servers. The rest of his time was consumed by lessons. He learned of House Levian's storied history, its rise during the Third Expansion, its role in establishing the first diplomatic channels with non-human civilizations, its gradual decline after his great-grandfather's death. He memorized the names and relationships of the other 11 noble houses, their alliances and rivalries, their specialties and weaknesses. Court etiquette proved more challenging. Jace, who had never worried about which fork to use in a colony mess hall that provided only sporks, now had to master the intricacies of formal imperial dining with its 17 courses and 32 utensils. His posture, his gait, his manner of address, all required refinement according to X-SciFi's exacting standards. You continue to slouch when seated, the AI observed on the 8th day, as Jace attempted to maintain the proper dining posture through a simulated state dinner. A noble of House Levian must project authority at all times. I'm trying, Jace said through gritted teeth, his back aching from the unnatural position. I've spent my life hunched over machinery in narrow tunnels. This doesn't exactly come naturally. Nevertheless, it must be mastered, again. Most difficult of all were the lessons on Zolothi culture. The warrior race's customs were complex and often contradictory to human norms. Honor was paramount, yet defined differently than in human societies. Strength was valued, but unnecessary violence deplored. Family units were fluid, with individuals choosing their associations rather than being bound by birth, making the concept of a political marriage all the more alien to their worldview. The consort bond is an anomaly in Zolothi culture, X-SciFi explained during one particularly intense session. It was accepted only due to the dire circumstances following the border conflicts, when both species faced extinction without cooperation. So Commander Ravana will resent the bond itself. Not just me personally, Jace concluded. That is a probable assessment, the AI confirmed. Zolothi warriors are sworn to honor agreements, even those they disagree with. However, the relationship dynamic will require careful navigation on your part. By the time Aurelian Prime appeared on the ship's navigation display, Jace felt simultaneously overprepared and completely inadequate. His head swam with protocols and histories. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still just a colony boy playing dress-up. X-SciFi provided him with formal attire for arrival. Garments in House Levian's colors of deep blue and silver, made from materials finer than anything Jace had ever touched. The cut was elegant, yet practical, with subtle armor weave integrated into the fabric. A precaution, the AI explained, until his position was secure. "We will dock at the Imperial Spire in approximately 2 hours," X-SciFi informed him as he adjusted the unfamiliar clothing. "A genetic confirmation ceremony will be conducted immediately, followed by the awakening of Commander Rivana and the formal recognition of the consort bond." Jace's stomach twisted at the reminder. What if the genetic test fails? What if I'm not actually who you think I am? The preliminary scans conducted during our journey indicate a 99.7% probability of positive confirmation. However, in the unlikely event of failure, you would be returned to Iridia 6, and the search for the true heir would continue. The thought was almost tempting, a quick return to his simple, familiar life. But even as it crossed his mind, Jace knew he couldn't go back to the dust and monotony of the colony, not after glimpsing the vastness of the Empire and his potential place within it. As Aurelian Prime grew larger in the viewport, Jace understood why it was considered the jewel of the Empire. Unlike the harsh, reddish world he'd left behind, this planet shimmered with blues and greens, vast oceans, lush continents, and the gleaming spires of the capital city rising like crystal formations from the central landmass. 2 suns, one golden, one with a bluish tinge, cast their light across the scene, creating an ever-changing play of colors across the planet's surface. The ship descended through the atmosphere with barely a tremor, a testament to Imperial engineering. Cloud layers parted to reveal the sprawling capital in all its glory, a city that seemed to have grown organically from the planet itself, with buildings that curved and soared in harmony with the natural landscape. At its center stood the Imperial Spire, a structure of such impossible height and beauty that Jace could scarcely believe it was made by mortal hands. The spire was a joint creation of human architects and Zalathi crystal shapers, X-SciFi noted, observing Jace's awestruck expression. "It stands as a symbol of what our species can achieve in cooperation." Their ship docked at a mid-level platform extending from the spire's eastern face. As the engines powered down, Jace took a deep breath, centering himself as he'd been taught. "Remember," X-SciFi said as the exit ramp began to lower, "you are Jace Rowan Levian now, the last of your house. Carry yourself accordingly." Jace nodded, squared his shoulders, and stepped forward to meet his destiny. A delegation awaited him on the landing platform, a mixture of human and non-human officials in formal attire, their expressions carefully neutral as they assessed the young man who might soon join their ranks. At their center stood a tall, distinguished human with silver hair and piercing eyes, who stepped forward as Jace approached. "Welcome to Aurelian Prime, heir presumptive Levian," the man said, his voice carrying the refined accent of the Imperial core worlds. "I am Chancellor Marquez, senior representative of the human houses on the Imperial Council. We have awaited your arrival with great interest." Jace inclined his head precisely as he'd been taught, a gesture of acknowledgement between equals, not the deeper bow of a subordinate. "Thank you for your welcome, Chancellor. I am honored to stand before the Council." If Marquez was impressed by the colony boy's proper etiquette, he showed no sign of it. "The confirmation ceremony has been prepared. If you will follow me." The procession moved from the landing platform into the spire itself. Jace fought to maintain his composed expression as they entered corridors of breathtaking beauty, walls of a material that seemed halfway between crystal and living tissue, shifting subtly with flowing patterns of light. The floor beneath his feet hummed with energy, and the air itself carried harmonics that seemed to resonate with his very bones. They arrived at a circular chamber, dominated by a raised platform at its center. Around the edges stood more officials and what appeared to be recording devices. This was clearly an event of significant political importance. Jace was directed to the platform, where a slender pillar of light awaited. "The confirmation is simple," Chancellor Marquez explained. "Place your hand in the analyzer beam. It will extract a minute sample of genetic material for comparison against House Levian's registered pattern." Jace stepped forward, heart pounding despite his outward calm. He extended his hand into the column of light, feeling a momentary warmth and the faintest of pricks as the sample was taken. The light changed from white to blue, then pulsed as the analysis was conducted. For several long moments, the chamber was silent, save for the soft hum of the technology at work. Then, the beam turned a deep, vibrant gold and expanded outward, bathing Jace in its glow. Murmurs rippled through the assembled officials. "Confirmation achieved," announced an automated voice. "Genetic markers confirm subject as direct descendant of Lord Atticus Levian, third generation. House Levian continuity is verified." Chancellor Marquez's expression tightened almost imperceptibly before smoothing into a diplomatic smile. "Well, then, it seems the succession is valid. Congratulations. Lord Levian, your house is restored to the Council of 12. The formality of the address struck Jace like a physical blow. Lord Levian, not Jace Rowan, drill technician, not even the transitional heir presumptive. He was, in the eyes of the Empire, a noble lord with all the power and responsibility that entailed. "Thank you, Chancellor," he managed to reply, his voice steadier than he felt. "I hope to serve the Empire with the same dedication as my ancestors." "Indeed." Marquez's tone suggested reservation. "Now we proceed to the second phase of your confirmation, the awakening of your consort and the formalization of the bond." The delegation moved deeper into the spire, descending to levels where the architecture took on a more alien aspect. Here, the crystalline elements were more pronounced, and the harmonics in the air shifted to tones that made the hairs on the back of Jace's neck stand up. They were entering the Zalothi section of the shared imperial seat. A new set of officials joined them, Zalothi dignitaries whose crystalline skin ranged from deep violet to pale azure. Their eyes, with their characteristic inner luminescence, assessed Jace with expressions ranging from curiosity to thinly veiled disdain. One stepped forward, an elder whose skin had faded to a translucent lavender with age. "I am Elder Saran, mentor to Commander Rivana and witness to the consort bond. You are younger than we anticipated, human lord." Jace recalled his lessons on Zalothi interaction. Direct honesty was valued over diplomatic evasion. "I am 17 standard years. Elder Saran. My age makes me no less committed to honoring the bond that unites our peoples." The elder's luminescent eyes narrowed slightly. "We shall see. Words are wind, actions are stone." It was a Zalothi proverb Axis 7 had taught him, one that emphasized the primacy of deeds over declarations. They entered a chamber unlike any Jace had seen before. At its center stood what appeared to be a vertical pool of liquid crystal, suspended in a gravitational field. Within this shimmering medium floated a figure, Commander Rivana, her features serene in suspended animation, yet still carrying the stern nobility he had observed in the hologram. In person, she was even more imposing, tall and powerfully built, with the characteristic muscle definition of a Zalothi warrior. She nevertheless possessed a grace that transcended species. Her crystalline skin caught the chamber's light, refracting it in patterns that seemed to tell stories across her form. The silver filaments of her hair drifted in the stasis medium, like exotic aquatic plants. "The stasis field will now be deactivated," announced a Zalothi technician. "The commander will require approximately 30 seconds to regain consciousness." Jace's mouth went dry as the liquid crystal began to recede, flowing back into receptacles at the base of the chamber. Rivanna's form was gradually lowered until her feet touched the floor. For a moment, she remained perfectly still. Then her chest expanded with a deep breath, and her eyes, a brilliant violet that seemed to contain galaxies, snapped open. Those eyes immediately found Jace, narrowing as they took in his youthful appearance. Her posture, already martial, stiffened further. When she spoke, her voice was deeper than he expected, with harmonics that seemed to resonate in his chest. "This is the heir of House Levian? This child?" The words were precise, each one cutting like a blade. Elder Saran stepped forward. "Commander Rivanna, may I present Lord Jace Rowan Levian, genetically confirmed heir to House Levian, and your consort under the terms of the Alliance Accords." Rivanna's gaze never left Jace as she responded. "The Empire would bind me to a human who has not even reached full maturity? This is how my service is valued?" Jace felt the weight of every eye in the chamber upon him. This was his first test as Lord Levian. His response would set the tone for their relationship and his standing among both humans and Zelothi. Drawing on every lesson Axis 7 had drilled into him, he stepped forward and addressed Rivanna directly. "Commander, I understand your disappointment. I neither sought this bond nor had knowledge of it until 14 days ago. But now that fate has joined our paths, I offer you my respect as a warrior and my commitment to honor the bond between us, however it may develop." For a long moment, Rivanna simply stared at him, her alien features unreadable. Then, with a motion almost too fast to follow, she closed the distance between them. Standing before him, she towered over his frame, her presence radiating power and authority. "You speak well for one so young," she said, her voice slightly softer but no less intense. "But pretty words cannot bridge the gap between us. Jace Rowan Levian, you are a child pretending to be a lord, thrust into a position you cannot possibly understand. And I am a warrior of the Third Fleet, bound by honor to a pact I despise." She turned to address the assembled officials. "I will honor the letter of the consort bond as required by the Accords. But do not expect me to play the adoring mate to satisfy political theater." With that declaration hanging in the air, she turned and strode from the chamber, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Chancellor Marquez cleared his throat. "Well, Lord Levian, it appears your consort will require adjustment time. Not unexpected, given Zelothi temperament." Elder Saran shot the Chancellor a look of barely concealed contempt before addressing Jace. "Commander Rivanna honors her obligations, young lord, but true bonds cannot be forced by law or protocol. Remember that." As the officials began to disperse, discussing the ceremony and its implications in hushed tones, Jace stood motionless, still processing the encounter. His unwilling bride hadn't threatened him outright, but her disdain had been palpable. Somehow, he needed to find a way to connect with her, not just for political stability, but because some instinct told him that behind her fierce exterior lay a person worth knowing. Axis 7 appeared beside him, its holographic form calibrated to the Spire's systems. Initial interaction assessment, suboptimal, but within predicted parameters. The commander's reaction was actually less hostile than our modeling suggested. "That was less hostile?" Jace muttered. "She did not challenge you to combat or deny the bond outright," the AI pointed out. "For a Zelothi warrior of her standing, this constitutes remarkable restraint." "Wonderful," Jace sighed. "So what happens now?" "Now, you will be escorted to your shared quarters in the Levian wing of the Spire. The formal presentation to the full Imperial Court will occur tomorrow at the Grand Convocation." "Shared quarters," Jace repeated, alarm evident in his voice. "You mean Rivanna and I are expected to live together? Starting today?" "The consort bond requires cohabitation," Axis 7 confirmed. However, Imperial protocol acknowledges the need for adjustment periods. Your suite contains separate sleeping chambers, connected by common areas. That was something, at least. The thought of sharing immediate personal space with the intimidating commander had sent a spike of panic through Jace. Not that he had anything against the Zolothi. Their species was considered quite beautiful by human standards. But the combination of her obvious displeasure and his own inexperience made the prospect of proximity daunting. A human attendant approached, bowing respectfully. "My lord, if you'll follow me, I'll show you to your quarters." With a deep breath, Jace followed, wondering just how many more surprises this day would bring. The Levian wing of the Imperial Spire proved to be a testament to the house's former glory. Unlike the austere mining colony quarters that had been Jace's home, these rooms were spacious and elegant, combining human comfort with Zolothi aesthetic sensibilities. The main chamber featured sweeping views of Aurelian Prime's twin suns, now beginning their synchronous descent toward the horizon. The attendant gave him a brief tour: living areas, study, dining space, and the two separate sleeping chambers positioned at opposite ends of the suite. Rivana was nowhere to be seen, though the attendant mentioned that the commander had already been escorted to the quarters. "Your personal effects have been transferred from the ship," the attendant informed him. "A formal dinner will be served here in 2 hours. Imperial protocol suggests you use this time to rest and prepare for your first meal with your consort." After the attendant departed, Jace stood in the center of the vast main chamber, feeling impossibly small and out of place among the luxury. His entire living quarters on Iridia Sixik could have fit in this single room with space to spare. The furnishings alone probably cost more than he would have earned in a decade of repairing drills. He found his meager belongings had been unpacked and arranged in his sleeping chamber, his tools laid out on a workbench that seemed to have been specially installed. The hollow frame of his parents placed on a bedside table. The thoughtful touch was surprisingly moving. Deciding to explore the suite further, Jace moved cautiously through the common areas, half expecting to encounter Rivana at any moment. Instead, he found himself drawn to a smaller room off the main chamber, a study filled with books and data crystals, apparently preserved from his family's previous occupation of these quarters. He was examining the titles when a voice from the doorway made him jump. "Your ancestors collected knowledge from across the galaxy. At least they had that virtue." Rivana stood there, having changed from her stasis garments into what appeared to be a more comfortable version of Zolothi military attire, fitted but not ceremonial. Up close, without the formality of the awakening ceremony, Jace could better appreciate the alien beauty of her features. The crystalline quality of her skin seemed to shift with her emotions, currently a deep violet that suggested caution or reserve. "Commander," Jace acknowledged, inclining his head respectfully. "I didn't hear you approach." "Zolothi move quietly when we choose to," she said, entering the study, but maintaining distance between them. A useful skill in both diplomacy and warfare. Jace sensed an opening for conversation. "I'd like to learn more about Zolothi ways, if you're willing to teach me. My instruction during the journey here was limited." Rivana's luminescent eyes studied him with an intensity that made him want to fidget. But he held his ground, meeting her gaze steadily. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why would you wish to learn of a culture forced upon you by ancient pacts and imperial decree?" "Because we're stuck with each other. At least for now," Jace answered honestly. "And I'd rather understand you than fear you." Something flickered across her features. Surprise. Perhaps at his directness. "You fear me, human boy?" "Any sensible person would," Jace admitted with a small smile. "You're a legendary commander with combat experience, and I'm a mechanic from a mining colony who just found out he's supposedly nobility. But I'm not afraid to learn. Commander Rivana." She seemed to consider this, then moved to one of the bookshelves, selecting a crystal and placing it in a reader. A holographic display appeared between them. Star charts, by the look of them. "Your house Levian and my family line first encountered each other here," she said, indicating a star system near the border between human and Zolothi space. A battle that ended in stalemate when both commanding officers recognized the pointlessness of the conflict. That recognition became the seed of the peace accords. Jace stepped closer to the display, genuinely interested. "So our families have history beyond just the arranged marriage." "Our lineages were bound by respect before they were bound by politics," Rivana confirmed. "That, at least, is worth honoring." It was a small concession, but Jace recognized it as significant. Before he could respond, however, the suite's communication system chimed. "Lord Levian," came a formal voice. "Chancellor Marquez requests your presence in the advisory chamber immediately. A matter of urgent protocol requires discussion before this evening's formal dinner." Rivana's expression hardened. "Already the human politicians seek to separate us and whisper their instructions to you. Go, then. Learn how they wish you to manage your difficult alien wife." "That's not," Jace began, but she cut him off with a sharp gesture.
"It is exactly what they intend. I have played this game before, Jace Rowan Levian. But know this, I cannot be managed, manipulated, or mollified. Remember that when they fill your ears with strategies and suggestions—"
With that, she turned and left the study. Her movements fluid, yet somehow conveying her displeasure. Jace sighed. The brief moment of connection already evaporated. Steeling himself, he responded to the summons, following the directional indicators that appeared in the corridor outside the suite. The advisory chamber turned out to be a small, secure room where Chancellor Marquez waited, along with two other human officials Jace didn't recognize. Their expressions were grave as he entered. "Lord Levian, thank you for joining us promptly," Marquez began. "We felt it necessary to brief you on certain political realities before you further interact with Commander Rivana." "What kind of realities?" Jace asked, instantly wary. One of the other officials, a sharp-featured woman with calculating eyes, spoke up. "The consort bond between House Levian and the Zolothi Imperium is more than a simple marriage. My lord, it is a cornerstone of our interspecies alliance. The strength, or weakness, of your relationship with Commander Rivana will be interpreted as a reflection of human-Zolothi relations as a whole." "Meaning?" "Meaning," Marquez continued, "that her obvious reluctance and your visible inexperience create a dangerous political liability. There are factions within both human and Zolothi societies that would prefer to see our alliance dissolve, returning to the days of separated territories and clear boundaries." The third official, an older man with military bearing, added, "Intelligence suggests increased activity among anti-integration groups on both sides. Your confirmation as heir and the reactivation of the consort bond have accelerated their timeline." Jace processed this information, recalling Axis 7's lessons on imperial politics. "You're saying we might be in danger?" "Not immediately," Marquez assured him. "The Spire's security is unparalleled. But you must understand the importance of presenting a united front with your consort. Public discord between you would be seized upon by these factions as proof that our species cannot truly coexist."
"I can't exactly force her to like me," Jace pointed out. "She made her feelings quite clear."
The female official leaned forward. "We don't expect miracles, Lord Levian, but we do expect effort. Learn to navigate Zolothi customs. Show respect for her accomplishments. Find common ground. And above all, never contradict her publicly. Zolothi culture places enormous value on saving face." The meeting continued with more specific advice and warnings, each making Jace increasingly aware of the political minefield he'd stepped into. By the time he was dismissed to prepare for dinner, his head was swimming with implications and instructions. Returning to his quarters, he found the dining area prepared for an intimate meal for two. Soft, ambient lighting highlighted a table set with both human and Zolothi dining implements. Another reminder of the cultural divide he was expected to bridge. Rivana entered precisely at the appointed time, now dressed in a formal Zolothi ensemble that managed to be both elegant and martial. The crystalline elements of her attire caught the light, creating subtle patterns across the walls as she moved. "Your human advisors have filled your head with strategies." "I see," she observed as they took their seats. "It shows in your expression." Jace decided honesty was the best approach. "They're concerned about appearances, about what our relationship signals to the wider empire." Rivana made a sound that might have been a laugh, though it held little humor. "Of course they are. Appearances are all that matter in imperial politics. The reality beneath the surface is irrelevant, so long as the facade remains intact." An attendant entered silently to serve the first course, a dish that appeared designed to be palatable to both human and Zolothi tastes. Jace waited until they were alone again before responding. "I disagree," he said quietly. "What's beneath the surface is exactly what matters. The facade only holds if there's something real supporting it." Rivana paused, her utensil halfway to her mouth. Those luminescent eyes studied him with renewed interest. An unusual perspective for a human noble. "I'm not really a noble," Jace reminded her. 2 weeks ago, I was fixing broken machinery in mining tunnels. I learned to value function over appearance because when a drill fails 200 meters underground, no one cares how pretty it looks, only whether it works. "A practical philosophy," she acknowledged. "But we are not machines. Jace, Rowan, Levian. We cannot simply be repaired with the right tools and knowledge." "No," he agreed. "But we can try to understand how we work, what drives us, what matters to us." He met her gaze directly. "What matters to you, Commander Rivana? Beyond duty and honor and obligation, what do you value?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. For a moment, the stern facade faltered, and Jace glimpsed something vulnerable beneath, something thoughtful, and perhaps even lonely. "A direct question," she said finally. "Zolothi appreciate directness." She set down her utensil, considering. "I value truth, even when uncomfortable. I value skill, honestly earned. I value connection forged through shared purpose, rather than convenience or decree." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "And you, human boy? What does the mechanic value?" "Problem solving," Jace answered without hesitation. "Finding ways to make things work when they seem broken beyond repair. And..." He glanced toward his sleeping chamber, where the hollow frame of his parents sat. "And memory, honoring those who came before while building something new." Something shifted in Rivana's expression. Not softening, exactly, but a subtle recalibration. "You are not what I expected, Jace, Rowan, Levian." "Neither are you," he admitted, "though I'm not sure what I expected." "You expected a warrior, cold and unyielding," she said, matter-of-factly. "And I am those things. But we Zolothi are not one-dimensional, just as humans are not all the same. We contain multitudes, as your poet once wrote." Jace blinked in surprise. "You know human poetry." The faintest hint of a smile touched her lips. "I had 3 years in stasis with only data crystals for company. I studied many aspects of human culture. Your arts, your sciences, your histories. Knowledge of one's allies, or opponents, is tactically advantageous." The meal progressed with conversation that, while not warm, was at least civil. They carefully navigated around the most sensitive topics: the forced nature of their bond, the political implications of their relationship, instead finding neutral ground in discussions of technology, cosmic phenomena, and the structural marvels of the spire itself. By the time the final course was cleared away, Jace felt a small sense of accomplishment. They had shared a meal without hostility, found some common interests, and established a baseline of communication. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. "Tomorrow will be challenging," Ravana said as they concluded the evening. "The Grand Convocation will put us on display for the entire imperial court. Every interaction will be scrutinized, every word analyzed for hidden meaning." "Any advice?" Jace asked. "Be yourself," she said, surprising him. "Your inexperience is obvious. Trying to hide it behind a veneer of false sophistication will only make you appear foolish. But your directness has a certain appeal. Use that." With that almost compliment lingering in the air, she inclined her head in a formal gesture of respect and retired to her sleeping chamber, leaving Jace to ponder the complex woman who was now, by imperial decree, his wife in all but the most intimate sense. As he prepared for sleep in his own chamber, surrounded by luxury he had never imagined, Jace reflected on the whirlwind that his life had become. In just over 2 weeks, he had gone from anonymous colony worker to imperial noble with an alien warrior queen as his consort. The challenges ahead were daunting, the politics treacherous, and his unwilling bride remained largely a mystery. Yet, despite it all, he felt a strange sense of purpose taking root. Perhaps this was where he was meant to be, not fixing broken machinery, but helping to maintain something far more complex and valuable: the peace between two powerful species. With that thought, he drifted into sleep, unaware that the first test of that peace was already being set in motion. The following day dawned with the twin suns of Aurelian Prime, creating a spectacular light show across the horizon, bands of gold and blue intermingling as they rose. Jace had been awakened by a gentle chime from the suite systems, programmed to allow adequate preparation time for the Grand Convocation. He found formal attire laid out for him, ceremonial garments that combined the traditional style of House Levian with subtle elements of Zalothi design, symbolizing the union. The fabric was unlike anything he'd ever worn, seemingly alive with shifting patterns when it caught the light. Axis 7 appeared, as he was struggling with the more complex fastenings. "Allow me to assist, Lord Levian. The ceremonial clasps are designed to represent the intertwining of human and Zalothi heritage." "I feel like I'm wearing the Imperial Treasury," Jace muttered, noting the intricate metalwork and what appeared to be actual gemstones integrated into the garment. "The formal attire of House Levian is indeed valuable," the AI confirmed. "But its worth lies more in historical significance than material cost. This particular ensemble was worn by your great-grandfather during the signing of the peace accords." The weight of history settled on Jace's shoulders, along with the garment. He was literally stepping into the role his ancestors had created, wearing their clothes, occupying their quarters, continuing their legacy. It made his own identity seem fragile by comparison. When he emerged into the common area, he found Ravana already waiting. Her formal attire was even more striking than his, a harmonious blend of crystalline armor elements and flowing fabric that seemed to capture and amplify the light around her. The silver filaments of her hair had been arranged in an intricate pattern that framed her face, emphasizing the alien beauty of her features. For a moment, Jace simply stared, struck by the sight of her in full ceremonial splendor. She was, he had to admit, magnificent. "You clean up well, human boy," she observed, her tone less harsh than the previous day. "The garments of your house suit you better than I expected." "Thank you," he managed. "You look extraordinary." Something flickered across her features, surprise at the genuine compliment. Perhaps. The ceremonial regalia of a Zalothi commander is designed to inspire awe and respect. It appears to be functioning as intended. Before Jace could respond, the suite's communication system announced the arrival of their escort. It was time. The procession to the Grand Convocation Hall wound through the spire's most impressive corridors, Spaces clearly designed to humble visitors with their scale and beauty. Guards in ceremonial armor flanked them, and officials from both human and Zolothi administrations followed at a respectful distance. As they approached the massive doors of the convocation hall, Ravana spoke quietly, for Jace's ears alone. "Remember what I said. Be yourself, but also remember what you represent. Every eye will be upon us, judging not just us as individuals, but our species through our actions." Jace nodded, grateful for the advice and the implied partnership, however temporary. "Together, then?" The faintest of smiles touched her lips. "For now, human boy, for now." The doors swung open, and a sonorous voice announced them. "Presenting Lord Jace Rowan Levian, confirmed heir to House Levian, and his consort, Commander Ravana of the 3rd Zolothi Fleet." The Grand Convocation Hall lived up to its name. Vast beyond reason, with a ceiling so high it seemed to touch the sky itself. The chamber held hundreds of beings from across the Empire. Humans in formal attire mingled with Zolothi in ceremonial regalia, along with representatives of a dozen other species Jace had only ever seen in educational broadcasts. A path cleared before them, leading to the central dais, where the highest officials of the Empire awaited. Chancellor Marquez and Elder Saran stood prominently among them, their expressions carefully neutral as they watched the young lord and his reluctant consort approach. Jace felt countless eyes upon him, assessing, judging, wondering if this colony boy could possibly fill the role thrust upon him. Beside him, Ravana moved with perfect poise, her warrior's bearing lending him confidence by proximity. Together, they ascended the steps to the dais. What followed was a formal ceremony that Axis 7 had prepared him for. Ritualized words of acceptance into the Council of 12, oaths of loyalty to the Empire, acknowledgement of the consort bond. Jace spoke his parts clearly, drawing on the instruction of the past 2 weeks and a lifetime of practical problem-solving to navigate the unfamiliar terrain of Imperial protocol. When the formalities concluded, the gathering transitioned to a more social affair, though no less politically charged. Nobles and dignitaries approached to offer congratulations and thinly veiled assessments. Jace did his best to remember names, ranks, and affiliations, grateful for Ravana's occasional subtle assistance when he faltered. "Lord Tarek of House Droma," she murmured, as a particularly imposing human noble approached. "Ancient rivalry with House Levian over mining rights in the Perdition Belt. Be respectful, but firm." Jace followed her lead, navigating the complex social waters with growing confidence. They made an effective team, he realized, his straightforward manner complementing her strategic insight, his genuine interest in others, balancing her reserved dignity. As the event progressed, Jace found himself separated from Ravana when a group of Zolothi officials requested her presence for what appeared to be a serious discussion. He watched her go, noting the stiffness in her posture that suggested discomfort with whatever was being discussed. "Your consort is quite the prize, Lord Levian," came a smooth voice at his elbow. "Commander Ravana's battle record is legendary among both our peoples." Jace turned to find a human noble he hadn't been introduced to, a man of middle years with sharp features and calculating eyes. Something about his manner put Jace instantly on alert. "She is a distinguished warrior," Jace agreed carefully. "Though I would not use the word prize. Commander Ravana is her own person, not a possession." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "How progressive of you. But surely you understand that the consort bond is, at its heart, a transfer of allegiance. Her loyalty now belongs to House Levian, to you." "I believe loyalty is earned, not decreed," Jace replied, keeping his tone pleasant despite his growing dislike for the conversation. "May I ask whom I have the pleasure of addressing?" "Lord Varen," the man supplied. "A friend of your house, once upon a time. I knew your mother, actually, before she chose exile. A waste of potential, that decision. The mention of his mother caught Jace off guard. You knew Alara.
Oh yes. Brilliant woman. Could have been a power in the Empire had she not inherited her mother's inconvenient idealism. Varen's tone suggested this was a character flaw rather than a virtue. I hope you take after your great-grandfather instead. He understood the necessities of rule.
Before Jace could respond, a commotion near the hall's main entrance drew attention. Security personnel were moving with purpose, and urgent conversations broke out across the gathering. Chancellor Marquez appeared at Jace's side, his expression grave. My lord, a security situation has developed. We need to move you to a safe location immediately. What's happening? Jace asked, scanning the hall for Rivanna. Where is the commander? Being secured separately, Marquez assured him. Please, come with me now. Something in the Chancellor's manner triggered Jace's instincts, the same ones that had kept him alive during tunnel collapses on Iridia 6. No, I need to find Rivanna first. There isn't time, Marquez insisted, gripping Jace's arm. The threat is imminent. Jace pulled free. Then she's in danger too. I won't leave without her. Before Marquez could argue further, the lighting in the Grand Convocation Hall flickered and died, plunging the vast space into darkness. Emergency illumination activated moments later, bathing everything in an eerie blue glow. The crowd's confused murmurs turned to alarm as the main doors sealed with an ominous thud. Security breach, announced an automated voice. All systems entering lockdown protocol. Please remain calm and follow security personnel instructions. Jace used the momentary confusion to slip away from Marquez, moving against the flow of the crowd toward the area where he'd last seen Rivanna. The formal attire hampered his movement, but years of navigating narrow mining tunnels had given him a knack for slipping through tight spaces. He spotted Elder Saran and made his way to the Zalothi official. Elder, where is Commander Rivanna? The Elder's luminescent eyes narrowed with concern. She was summoned to the eastern antechamber just before the power failure. A message supposedly from you. I sent no message, Jace said, alarm rising. Which way? Elder Saran pointed toward a small doorway, partially hidden behind a decorative column. Jace moved toward it immediately, ignoring the security personnel attempting to herd nobles toward designated safe areas. The antechamber was dark when Jace entered, the emergency lighting apparently non-functional in this section. He moved carefully, wishing he had his toolkit with its reliable illuminator. Rivanna, he called softly. A sound to his right, the whisper of movement followed by a grunt of exertion. Jace moved toward it, his eyes slowly adapting to the darkness. Shapes began to form from the shadows, figures engaged in silent combat. One of them was unmistakably Rivanna, her crystalline skin catching what little light existed. She was surrounded by at least 3 attackers, their forms obscured by what appeared to be stealth garments that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Despite being outnumbered, Rivanna moved with lethal grace, her formal attire seemingly no impediment to her fighting ability. As Jace watched, she dispatched one attacker with a precise strike to the throat, then spun to engage the others. But even a Zalothi commander had limitations. One of the attackers produced what looked like a neural disruptor, a weapon designed to incapacitate without killing, suggesting they wanted her alive. The distinctive hum of the device powering up alerted Jace to the imminent danger. Without thinking, he grabbed a ceremonial vase from a nearby pedestal and hurled it at the attacker. His aim, honed by years of throwing tools to fellow technicians across mining shafts, was true. The vase shattered against the attacker's head, disrupting their aim and causing the neural pulse to go wide. Jace? Rivanna's voice held surprise and something else, concern, perhaps. Behind you! He called, as another attacker lunged from the shadows. Rivanna whirled, but the distraction of Jace's presence had cost her a crucial moment. The attacker's weapon, some kind of stun baton, connected with her side. She staggered but didn't fall, retaliating with a vicious counterattack that sent her assailant sprawling. The momentary advantage gone, the remaining attackers regrouped, circling warily. One of them spoke, voice distorted by a modulator. "The human lord is unexpected. Take him too. He'll make useful leverage." Jace looked around frantically for a weapon, finding nothing but decorative items unsuited for combat. Rivanna moved to position herself between him and the attackers, her protective stance instinctual, despite their complicated relationship. "Stay behind me," she ordered. "They want to use you against me." "We want justice," the lead attacker corrected. "The consort bond is an abomination, a symbol of how the Zolothi have been subjugated through political manipulation. We're here to free you, Commander." "By attacking me?" Rivanna's tone was scathing. "By disrupting Imperial security and endangering hundreds?" "Necessary sacrifices for the greater good," the attacker replied. "The human houses have controlled our people for too long through these diplomatic bonds. It ends today, with you." The standoff was interrupted by the sound of approaching security forces, boots on marble, and the distinctive whine of Imperial stun weapons charging. The attackers tensed, realizing their window was closing. "If we can't free you willingly, we'll free you by eliminating the bond," the leader decided, raising a weapon toward Jace. "The death of the human lord will dissolve the consort obligation." Time seemed to slow. Jace saw the weapon aim at his chest, saw Rivanna realize the attacker's intent a fraction of a second too late to intercept. In that stretched moment, he made a decision that would change everything. Instead of diving for cover, Jace stepped forward, placing himself more fully in the line of fire, but also partially shielding Rivanna from a second attacker moving to flank her. It wasn't a calculated move, but an instinctual one, born of the same impulse that had led him to protect fellow miners during tunnel collapses. The weapon fired, a concentrated plasma bolt designed to penetrate armor. Jace felt searing heat as it grazed his shoulder, spinning him around with the impact. He fell, pain blooming across his upper body, the ceremonial garments smoldering. What happened next was a blur of motion and light. Rivanna, seeing Jace fall, unleashed a fury that transcended normal combat parameters. Her movements became a lethal dance, too fast for the human eye to fully track. The crystalline elements of her skin glowed with an inner light that cast harsh shadows across the antechamber. In seconds, the remaining attackers were incapacitated, not dead. Jace noted through the haze of pain, but thoroughly neutralized. Rivanna had shown restraint, even in her rage. Security forces burst into the antechamber, weapons raised, only to find the threat already contained. Rivanna ignored them, kneeling beside Jace with uncharacteristic urgency. "Foolish human boy," she muttered, examining his wound with gentle fingers that belied her harsh tone. "What possessed you to step into a plasma bolt?" Jace managed a weak smile despite the pain. "Seemed like the right thing to do. You were outnumbered." "I am a Zolothi commander," she reminded him, applying pressure to slow the bleeding. "I have faced worse odds in real battles, not political skirmishes." "Still," Jace winced as she shifted him slightly, "couldn't let my wife face them alone. Bad form." Something flickered in Rivanna's luminescent eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at his use of the term wife, without irony or resentment. Before she could respond, medical personnel arrived, bringing with them sophisticated treatment equipment. "The wound is serious, but not life-threatening," Rivanna informed the medics, her tone suggesting that they had better ensure this assessment remained accurate. The plasma was a grazing hit, not a direct impact. As they moved Jace onto a medical transport platform, he reached out, catching Rivanna's hand. "The attackers. They said they were trying to free you. From me. From the bond." She glanced at the captured assailants, now being secured by Imperial security. There are factions among my people who view the peace accords as capitulation. They see the consort bonds as chains, rather than bridges. Her gaze returned to Jace. They are not entirely wrong in principle, but their methods. She shook her head. Violence against the innocent is never justified.
Am I innocent?
Jace asked. The pain medication's beginning to make him lightheaded. I'm part of the system they're fighting against. Just by existing. By claiming my inheritance. Rivanna's expression softened fractionally. You did not create the situation, Jace Rowan Levian. And today, you showed courage I did not expect. Now rest. We will speak when you are healed. The last thing Jace saw before the medications pulled him under was Rivanna standing tall beside him. Her crystalline features set in a protective expression that, just days ago, he would have thought impossible. Jace drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of being moved to medical facilities, of voices discussing tissue regeneration and recovery protocols. Through it all, one constant remained: Rivanna's presence, sometimes at his bedside, sometimes conferring with security officials in the corridor outside, but always nearby. When he finally woke fully, the pain had subsided to a dull ache. He found himself in a private medical suite within the spire, advanced equipment monitoring his vital signs. Afternoon light streamed through large windows, suggesting he'd been unconscious for some time. Rivanna sat in a chair beside his bed, studying a data crystal with intense concentration. She wore simpler attire now, practical clothing suited for movement rather than ceremony. The silver filaments of her hair were pulled back in a utilitarian style that somehow enhanced rather than diminished her striking features. Sensing his awakening, she set aside the crystal and regarded him with those luminescent eyes. The medical AI predicted you would regain full consciousness within this hour. It appears to be functioning properly. Jace attempted to sit up, wincing slightly. How long was I out? 26 standard hours, she replied. The plasma weapon caused significant tissue damage, but the medical technology here is exceptional. You will recover fully, with minimal scarring. He glanced down at his shoulder, now covered with a transparent healing membrane through which he could see new skin forming. Did they catch all the attackers? Yes, a splinter group calling themselves the True Zolothi. Isolationists who believe any cooperation with humans dilutes our culture. Her tone suggested she found their philosophy simplistic. They plan to kill you and liberate me from the consort bond. Intelligence suggests they have supporters in both Zolothi and human communities. So much for the perfect political marriage bringing peace to the galaxy, Jace said with a weak attempt at humor. To his surprise, Rivanna's lips curved in what might almost be called a smile. Few things in the Empire are as simple as they appear in official broadcasts. Human boy. A comfortable silence fell between them, the first truly comfortable moment they had shared. Jace studied her profile as she gazed out the window at the spectacular view of Aurelian Prime's capital city. The harsh lines of her features seemed softer somehow. Or perhaps he was simply learning to read them better. You could have let them kill me, he said finally. It would have freed you from the bond, just as they intended. Rivanna turned to him, her expression serious. Is that what you think of me? That I would allow an innocent to die for my convenience? No, Jace admitted. But it would have solved your problem. No more forced marriage to a child pretending to be a lord. Perhaps I have reconsidered my initial assessment, she said quietly. What you did in the antechamber, stepping into danger rather than away from it, that was not the action of a child. Before Jace could respond to this unexpected near compliment, the door slid open to admit Chancellor Marquez and Elder Saran. Both appeared relieved to see Jace conscious, though their expressions suggested the situation remained grave. Lord Levian, Marquez began. It is good to see you recovering. The attack has caused considerable concern throughout the Imperial Court. As it should, Elder Saran added. This was not merely an assassination attempt, but a symbolic strike at the foundation of our alliance. Jace glanced at Ravana, who gave him a nearly imperceptible nod of encouragement. What happens now? He asked. Security has been enhanced throughout the spire, Marquez explained. Once you are fully recovered, we recommend a public appearance to demonstrate that the assassination attempt failed in both its practical and symbolic objectives. And the attackers? Jace pressed. Elder Saran's luminescent eyes darkened slightly. They await Imperial justice. As the target of their attack, you have some say in their sentencing, as does Commander Ravana. Jace considered this. On Iridia 6, justice was straightforward. Work sabotage meant time in detention. Theft meant restitution plus penalty labor. But this was different. These weren't desperate miners stealing rations. These were political extremists willing to kill for their cause. They should face consequences, he said carefully, but not execution. That would only make martyrs of them and strengthen their cause. Ravana nodded approvingly. The human lord speaks wisdom, justice without vengeance. This is the Zalathi way as well, though many forget it in their zeal. Chancellor Marquez seems surprised by their united front. As you wish. We will arrange for rehabilitation and monitoring. He hesitated, then added, There is another matter we must discuss. The attack has raised questions about the security of the succession. The Imperial Council suggests accelerating certain aspects of your relationship. Jace frowned. Meaning? A formal consummation of the consort bond, Marquez stated bluntly, with appropriate witnesses to verify the union's validity. Of course. Tradition dictates. No. Ravana's voice cut through the Chancellor's explanation like a blade. We will not perform for an audience to satisfy Imperial tradition. The consort bond may be political, but it is not a spectacle. Marquez looked taken aback. Commander, you must understand the importance of following protocol in these matters. The validity of the succession is confirmed by genetics and imperial decree, Jace interjected, finding his own voice. Chancellor, I respect the traditions, but Commander Ravana is right. Some aspects of our relationship must remain private, regardless of political considerations. Elder Saran's eyes gleamed with what might have been approval. The young lord speaks with wisdom beyond his years. Zalothi tradition holds that bonds formed under observation are weakened by the very act of display. What grows in privacy grows stronger. Chancellor Marquez looked from one face to another, realizing he was outnumbered. Very well. Alternative arrangements can be made to satisfy the Council's concerns about succession security. But make no mistake, the Empire requires stability, and stability requires clear lines of succession. Which we will provide, Jace assured him, in our own time and on our own terms. After the officials departed, a silence fell between Jace and Ravana. The topic of consummation, however clinically it had been discussed, hung in the air between them, a reminder of the intimate aspects of their arrangement that both had tacitly agreed to defer. Thank you, Jace said finally, for supporting me against the Chancellor. I did not do it for you, Ravana clarified, though her tone lacked its former edge. I did it for myself, for my dignity. Zalothi do not mate for political convenience or under observation. Still, Jace persisted, we made a good team in there, like in the antechamber during the attack. Ravana considered this. Perhaps there is some benefit to presenting a united front, regardless of our private feelings. And what are your private feelings? Jace asked, surprising himself with his boldness. About all of this? About me? She moved to the window, gazing out at the twin suns, now beginning their descent toward the horizon. For a long moment, Jace thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than he'd ever heard it. I was angry. To be awakened from stasis and told I was bound to a human I had never met. It felt like the ultimate dishonor. Zolothi choose their mates through mutual respect earned in battle or shared purpose. She turned to face him, her crystalline features catching the dying light. But you faced those attackers without weapon or training. You placed yourself in danger to protect me, though I needed no protection. That complicates matters.
How so? Jace asked, hardly daring to breathe.
It gives me reason to reconsider my assessment of you, she admitted. Not as a consort. That remains a political arrangement I did not choose. But as a person worthy of respect? Perhaps. It wasn't a declaration of affection, but coming from Rivanna, it felt monumental. Jace couldn't suppress a smile. I'll take that as a win. The faintest echo of his smile appeared on her face. You set a low threshold for victory, human boy. Jace, he corrected gently. If we're going to be stuck together, you might as well use my name. She considered this, then inclined her head slightly. Jace, she repeated, the name sounding exotic in her harmonically complex voice. Rest now. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. As she moved toward the door, Jace called after her. Will you come back later? Rivanna paused, looking back over her shoulder. Yes, she said simply, and departed. True to her word, Rivanna returned that evening, bringing with her a selection of data crystals from the Levian library. Your healing will go faster if your mind is occupied, she explained, setting them beside his bed. These contain histories of both our peoples. Knowledge is never wasted. The next 3 days established a pattern. Jace's wound healed rapidly under the advanced care of the Imperial medical facilities. Rivanna visited regularly, sometimes bringing materials for him to study. Other times, simply sitting in companionable silence as she attended to her own duties via a portable command interface. On the 4th day, Jace was cleared to return to their quarters. The medical staff provided exercises to strengthen his healing shoulder and instructions for ongoing care. Rivanna, surprisingly, paid close attention to these instructions, clarifying several points with the precision of a military officer, ensuring mission parameters were fully understood. Their shared suite had been enhanced with additional security measures, though these were discreetly integrated into the existing design. As Jace settled back into his sleeping chamber, he found that his few possessions had been arranged with care, his tools cleaned and organized, the hollow frame of his parents positioned where he could see it from his bed.
I took the liberty of ordering your space,
Rivanna explained when he commented on it. Proper organization is essential for both recovery and security. Thank you, Jace said, genuinely touched by the consideration. It helps. That evening, as they shared a meal in their common area, Rivanna surprised him with a proposal. Your combat skills are inadequate, she stated bluntly. The attack demonstrated that you are a target, yet you have no means of defending yourself beyond throwing decorative objects. Jace chuckled. I'm a mechanic, not a warrior.
You are Lord Levian now, she countered, and my consort. Both roles make you vulnerable. I propose to train you in basic self-defense, nothing elaborate, but enough to keep you alive until help arrives, should another attempt be made.
The offer startled him. You want to teach me to fight? Like a Zolothi? Not like a Zolothi, she clarified. Our physiology differs too greatly, and our combat techniques are the product of generations of evolution. But I can teach you to use your human attributes effectively. You have good spatial awareness and quick reflexes, as you demonstrated with that vase. Jace considered the offer. It made practical sense, and beyond that, it represented another step in their evolving relationship, a willingness on Rivanna's part to share her expertise, to invest in his survival. I'd like that, he agreed. Thank you. Training began the next morning in a private exercise chamber adjacent to their quarters. Rivanna had arranged for the space to be secured and equipped with basic training aids. She arrived wearing what appeared to be Zolothi training attire, close-fitting but allowing full range of movement. She had provided similar garments for Jace, modified to accommodate human physiology. "The first principle of survival," she began as they faced each other on the training mats, "is awareness. Most beings are defeated before the first blow because they failed to perceive the threat." What followed was a challenging but fascinating lesson in spatial awareness, threat assessment, and basic defensive postures. Ravana was a demanding instructor, accepting no excuses but offering precise correction when needed. Despite the lingering soreness in his shoulder, Jace found himself energized by the training, both physically and mentally. Days turned into weeks as they settled into a routine that balanced political obligations with private moments of growing understanding. The training sessions continued daily, with Jace showing surprising aptitude for the defensive techniques Ravana taught him. In turn, he began to share his mechanical knowledge with her, explaining the principles behind the fusion drills and other technology he had mastered on Iridia 6. "Your understanding of systems is intuitive," she observed, after he had disassembled and reassembled a malfunctioning environmental control in their quarters. "You see connections where others see only components." "That's what kept me alive in the mining colony," Jace explained. "Understanding how things work together, not just individually. A drill isn't just a power source and a cutting head. It's how those parts interact that matters."
"A principle that applies to more than machinery,"
Ravana noted thoughtfully. Their public appearances became less strained as genuine respect began to replace the initial tension between them. The imperial court noted the change, with speculation running rampant about the nature of their relationship. Chancellor Marquez seemed pleased by the development, if somewhat puzzled by how quickly the hostile commander had apparently warmed to her young consort. Elder Saran, however, appeared unsurprised. "Respect earned is more powerful than respect demanded," the elderly Zolothi remarked during a private meeting with the couple. "You have begun to find your balance."
"We're trying,"
Jace acknowledged.
"It's not what either of us would have chosen,
"But we're making the best of it. Sometimes the paths we would not choose lead to destinations we could not imagine," Elder Saran replied cryptically. As the weeks passed, intelligence reports indicated that the true Zolothi movement had been temporarily disrupted by the failure of their assassination attempt, but not destroyed. Security remained tight, with both Jace and Ravana receiving regular briefings on potential threats. During one such briefing, conducted in their private quarters, an intelligence officer mentioned a concerning development. "We have reason to believe sympathizers may have infiltrated the Spire's engineering staff. Several systems have shown signs of tampering, though nothing critical has been affected yet." Jace's interest was immediately piqued.
"What kind of tampering,
and in which systems?" The officer seemed surprised by the technical question from the young lord. "Power distribution nodes, primarily. Minor fluctuations, load imbalances, subtle enough that they could be attributed to normal variance." "But they follow a pattern?" Jace pressed. "Yes, my lord. The variations appear to be sequential, moving through the grid in what our analysts believe could be a test of vulnerability." Jace glanced at Ravana, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd like to see the data," he said. "I have experience with power systems from my work on Iridia 6. Perhaps I can spot something your analysts missed." The intelligence officer looked to Ravana, who fixed him with a stern gaze. "Lord Levian was a systems specialist before assuming his title. His expertise in this area exceeds that of many of your engineers." With authorization granted, Jace spent the next several days reviewing the power grid data, identifying subtle anomalies that the Imperial technicians had overlooked. His experience with the chronically failing systems of the mining colony had given him an almost intuitive sense for when machinery was being pushed beyond its normal parameters. "They're testing the fail-safes," he explained to Ravana as they reviewed his findings in their quarters. creating minor fluctuations to map how the system responds, where the redundancies kick in, which sections are prioritized during load shifting. To what end? She asked, studying the diagrams he had created. If I wanted to create a catastrophic failure that would bypass the automatic safeguards, this is exactly the data I'd need to gather first. Jace pointed to several nodes on the schematic. These are the vulnerable points, where one failure could cascade into others if timed precisely. Rivanna's expression grew grave. We must take this to security immediately. The Imperial Security Chief, a veteran Zalathi warrior named Krell, was initially skeptical of the analysis provided by the young human lord. But as Jace walked him through the technical details, pointing out vulnerabilities that even the Spire's engineers had not fully appreciated, Krell's doubt turned to concern. These patterns suggest preparation for a major attack, the security chief concluded. But we cannot simply shut down the suspected infiltrators. That would alert them and potentially trigger whatever plan they have in motion. We need to let them think they're succeeding, Jace suggested. While preparing our own countermeasures, a strategy was developed. Security personnel would be positioned at critical junctions throughout the power grid, ready to intervene manually if necessary. Meanwhile, a secondary system would be prepared to take over essential functions should the primary grid fail. Most importantly, the suspected infiltrators would be allowed to continue their work under careful observation, in hopes of identifying their full network before making arrests. For 3 tense days, Jace divided his time between his public duties as Lord Levian and private consultations with the Spire's engineering team. Rivanna remained close, her combat experience proving valuable as they planned for various contingencies. On the 4th day, their vigilance was rewarded. The monitoring systems Jace had helped install detected a significant unauthorized access attempt at one of the main power distribution hubs. Security moved in quickly, apprehending 2 technicians in the act of installing what appeared to be a sophisticated override module. The captured saboteurs, however, triggered a deadman protocol, a signal that alerted their accomplices that the operation had been compromised. Throughout the Spire, systems began to fail as pre-planted devices activated simultaneously. Jace was with Rivanna in the security center when the attacks began. Alarms blared as sections of the Spire lost power, communication systems failed, and environmental controls in some areas began to malfunction. They're forcing an evacuation, Jace realized, studying the pattern of failures, creating chaos to cover something bigger. The security chief agreed. Standard protocol would be to evacuate the Imperial Council and other high-value individuals to the secure bunkers beneath the Spire. Which is exactly where they want you to go, Jace said grimly. The bunkers would concentrate all the leadership in one location, a perfect target. Rivanna's eyes narrowed. We need to countermand the evacuation order and secure the council members where they are. Communications were fragmented, with many systems offline. Rivanna used her military override codes to reach as many security teams as possible, while Jace worked with the engineering staff to stabilize the critical systems. The main junction for the eastern quadrant is failing, reported one of the engineers. If it goes, we lose life support to 17 levels. Jace studied the schematics. The override controls are isolated. We can't access them remotely. Someone needs to go there physically and manually reset the system, the engineer confirmed. But with the automated security in disarray, the corridors to that section are dangerous. We've lost contact with 2 teams already. Jace exchanged a look with Rivanna. I know power systems. You know combat. Together we might have a chance. She nodded without hesitation. Prepare what you need. We leave immediately. The journey through the compromised sections of the Spire was harrowing. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across corridors that had once seemed elegant and welcoming. Automated security drones, their programming corrupted by the saboteurs, patrolled randomly, some simply malfunctioning, others actively hostile. Ravana moved with the fluid grace of a born warrior, neutralizing threats before they could fully materialize. Jace followed closely, carrying the tools and components they would need to restore the junction. His training sessions with Ravana proved invaluable, as he evaded dangers she couldn't immediately eliminate. They encountered scattered groups of civilians and staff, directing them to secure areas where possible. The chaos was clearly serving its purpose, creating a situation where normal protocols broke down and security became increasingly difficult to maintain. When they finally reached the power junction, they found it in worse condition than anticipated. The saboteurs had physically damaged key components, not just reprogrammed them. Smoke filled the chamber, and sparks erupted from overloaded circuits. "Can you fix it?" Ravana asked, positioning herself to guard the entrance. Jace assessed the damage grimly. "Yes, but it will take time, and I'll need to shut down the remaining power to this section first. We'll be in complete darkness for at least 2 minutes." "Do what you must," she replied, drawing a small Zolothi weapon that emitted a soft blue glow. "I can see well enough with this." Jace worked quickly, his years of improvising repairs in the mining colony proving invaluable. With the main power cut, he used a portable diagnostic tool to identify the sabotaged components, replacing some and bypassing others. His fingers moved with practiced precision, despite the dim lighting and periodic sounds of combat, as Ravana engaged threats in the corridor outside. "Incoming!" she called sharply. "Multiple hostiles, heavily armed. The saboteurs must have realized what we're doing." 2 more minutes, Jace responded, not looking up from his work. "I've almost reconstructed the primary circuit." "You have 1 minute," she corrected, moving to a more defensive position. "They will be here sooner than that." The sounds of combat grew closer. Jace forced himself to focus on the delicate connections before him, trusting Ravana to keep the danger at bay just a little longer. This was what he was good at, fixing broken things under pressure, finding solutions when parts were missing and time was running out. A particularly loud explosion shook the chamber, followed by an eerie silence. Jace glanced up, fear spiking through him. "Ravana?" "Still here," came her reply, though her voice sounded strained. "But not alone. Finish your work, Jace." The final connections were the most critical. One wrong move could cause a feedback surge that would destroy not just this junction, but others throughout the grid. Jace took a deep breath, steadying his hands. With methodical precision, he completed the circuit reconstruction and initiated the restart sequence. Lights flickered, died, then steadied as the junction came back online. Emergency systems throughout the eastern quadrant began to reset, restoring life support and communications. Jace allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before turning to assist Ravana. The scene at the entrance stopped him cold. Ravana stood at the center of a half-circle of attackers, at least 6 figures in the dark attire of the true Zolothi movement. She had positioned herself to block the doorway completely, preventing any of them from reaching Jace or the restored junction. Blood, a strange, crystalline fluid that caught the light in mesmerizing patterns, seeped from a wound in her side, but her stance remained unwavering. The leader of the attackers, a tall Zolothi with unusually pale skin, addressed her with obvious frustration. "Stand aside, Commander. Your reputation is legendary. We have no desire to harm you. Our quarrel is with the human usurper and the corrupt system he represents." "Your quarrel is with the peace our peoples have built," Ravana replied, her voice steady despite her injury. "I stand where duty and honor require." "Honor?" the leader scoffed. "What honor is there in being bound to a human child? In being paraded as a symbol of Zolothi submission? The consort bond is a chain. Commander, we offer you freedom." Jace moved forward slowly, coming to stand beside Ravana despite her warning glance. "She's not bound to me," he said clearly. "I'm bound to her." The attackers seemed startled by his sudden appearance, and even more by his words. The leader's eyes narrowed. What game is this, human? No game, Jace replied. The truth. I didn't choose this bond any more than she did. But I respect Commander Rivana's honor, her skill, her wisdom. I learn from her every day. If one of us is elevated by this arrangement, it's me, not her. Rivana's luminescent eyes flickered to him briefly, something unreadable in their depths. The rebel leader seemed momentarily uncertain, his weapon lowering slightly. Taking advantage of the hesitation, Jace continued. If you truly believe I'm the problem, that my death would free her and restore some ideal of Zalothi independence, then take me. But leave her, and leave the innocent people of the Spire out of it. Jace, no, Rivana hissed, but he pressed on. I'm serious. If I must die, let me. But this sabotage, endangering thousands, that's not justice. It's terrorism. The rebel leader studied him, genuine surprise evident in his crystalline features. You would offer yourself to protect her? To protect the same system that forced you into this bond?
I would, Jace confirmed. Because despite its flaws, that system keeps peace between our peoples. And because Commander Rivana deserves better than to be freed through violence and chaos.
A tense silence filled the corridor as the rebels processed this unexpected development. The leader seemed to be reassessing his understanding of the situation, his gaze moving between Jace and Rivana with growing uncertainty. Before he could respond, however, the restored communication system blared to life. Attention all personnel. Sabotage attempts neutralized. Security forces have contained primary threat elements. Remaining hostiles are advised to surrender immediately. The rebel leader's expression hardened, his momentary doubt replaced by resolve. It seems our time is limited. A pity. I find myself curious about a human who would die for a Zalothi commander. He raised his weapon, aiming squarely at Jace. Let us test your conviction, Lord Levian. What happened next occurred too quickly for Jace to fully process. Rivana moved with blinding speed, her injured state seemingly forgotten as she intercepted the rebel leader. Her weapon, a ceremonial blade that had appeared in her hand as if by magic, stopped just short of the rebel's throat. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. The other rebels tensed, weapons half raised, waiting for their leader's fate to be decided. Jace held his breath, realizing he was witnessing a pivotal moment, not just in their personal story, but potentially in the broader narrative of human-Zalothi relations.
Rivana's voice, when she spoke, carried a weight and authority that filled the corridor. I will not kill you, Verak, not because you deserve mercy, but because spilling more Zalothi blood would only strengthen the cause you claim to serve.
The rebel leader, Verak, stared at her, genuine shock evident in his features. You know me. I know your family line, Rivana confirmed. Your grandmother served with honor in the Third Fleet. She understood that true strength comes from wisdom, not merely force. She would be ashamed to see her descendant threatening innocence and undermining the peace she fought to establish. The personal connection seemed to shake Verak more than the blade at his throat. For a moment, the fanaticism in his eyes wavered, revealing doubt and perhaps a flicker of shame. The moment was broken by the arrival of Imperial security forces, led by Security Chief Krell. The rebels, recognizing the futility of further resistance, surrendered their weapons. As they were secured and led away, Verak looked back once at Rivana and Jace, his expression now more confused than hostile. You had the right to kill me, he said to Rivana, by Zalothi law and tradition. Why didn't you? Rivana lowered her blade, her posture straightening despite her injury. Because some traditions must evolve if our people are to thrive. Mercy is not weakness. Verak. Sometimes it is the greater strength. As the rebels were led away, Jace turned to Rivana, concern evident in his expression. You're injured. We need to get you to medical. She waved away his concern, It is minor. Zolothi physiology is more resilient than human. I will heal. Nevertheless, she allowed him to support her as they made their way back through the now securing corridors of the spire. Security teams and emergency personnel moved efficiently to restore order. The worst of the crisis apparently averted. When they reached their quarters, however, Rivana's composure finally faltered. Away from watchful eyes, she sagged against Jace, the full weight of her injury and exertion catching up to her. "Let me help you," he said gently, guiding her to a seat. To his surprise, she didn't resist as he carefully examined her wound. A deep gash along her side, where some kind of energy weapon had pierced her defenses. The crystalline blood had slowed, but the injury was far from minor. "This needs proper treatment," Jace insisted. "I'm calling for a medical team." "No," Rivana said firmly. "Not yet. First, we must speak." She fixed him with those luminescent eyes, their intensity undimmed by her weakened state. "You offered yourself in my place. You were willing to die to protect me and the innocence of the spire." Jace shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "It seemed like the right thing to do." "It was foolish," she corrected, but there was no heat in her words. "Brave, but foolish. And yet—" She paused, seeming to search for words, an unusual hesitation for the normally decisive commander. "And yet, it demonstrated a quality I have rarely encountered, even among my own people." "What quality?" Jace asked. "True selflessness," she replied. "Not the calculated sacrifice of a tactician weighing odds, but the instinctive offering of one who values others above self." Her hand, cool and smooth with its crystalline texture, reached out to touch his. "It is not unworthy of respect. Coming from Rivana." This was high praise indeed. Jace felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the adrenaline of their recent ordeal. "Thank you," he said simply. "That means a lot, coming from you." Something shifted in her expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight relaxation of her usually rigid posture. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "this consort bond is not entirely the burden I first believed it to be." It was as close to an admission of changing feelings as Rivana had ever come. Jace smiled, careful not to push the moment too far. "I'm growing rather fond of it myself." A chime from the communication system interrupted them. Chancellor Marquez's voice filled the room, tense but controlled. "Lord Levian, Commander Rivana, your presence is requested in the Emergency Council chamber as soon as possible. The situation has been contained, but significant decisions must be made regarding the rebels and security moving forward." Rivana straightened, her warrior's discipline reasserting itself. "We will attend, but first, I require brief medical attention. Send a technician to our quarters." "Of course, Commander. A medical team is already en route." As they prepared to face the political aftermath of the attack, Jace found himself reflecting on how far they had come in the weeks since his arrival on Aurelian Prime. From reluctant strangers thrust together by ancient protocols to partners who had faced danger side by side. It wasn't the relationship either would have chosen, but it had become something neither would have predicted. The healing of Rivana's wound proceeded quickly. Zolothi physiology, proving remarkably resilient with proper treatment. The political healing, however, would take longer. The attack had exposed deep fractures within the Imperial Alliance, not just the obvious extremism of the true Zolothi movement, but more subtle tensions between traditional power structures and the changing realities of interspecies cooperation. In the weeks that followed, Jace and Rivana found themselves increasingly central to these discussions. Their unique perspective, as unwilling participants in an arranged bond who had nevertheless found common ground, made them unexpected voices for reform within the rigid imperial system. The consort bonds were created in a different era, Jace argued during one particularly heated council session. They serve their purpose in establishing initial trust between our peoples. But perhaps it's time to evolve beyond forced unions toward more voluntary forms of alliance. Elder Saran, who had become something of a mentor to both of them, supported this position. Traditions must be honored, but not at the expense of growth. What worked in the aftermath of conflict may not serve us best in an era of established peace. Chancellor Marquez and the more conservative elements of the council resisted these ideas initially, citing the stability provided by the traditional arrangements. But as public support grew for the young Lord Levian and his increasingly respected Zelothi consort, even the staunchest traditionalists began to consider compromise. Through it all, Jace and Rivana's private relationship continued to evolve. The training sessions expanded to include not just combat techniques, but cultural exchange. Rivana teaching Jace the intricacies of Zelothi philosophy and art, while he shared with her the practical ingenuity and adaptability that had defined his life on Iridia 66. "Your people create beauty from necessity," Rivana observed one evening as Jace showed her how to repurpose common components into a small but elegant light sculpture. Zelothi art is often ceremonial, created for tradition rather than practical use. There is wisdom in both approaches. "Balance in all things," Jace quoted from the Zelothi texts she had been teaching him. "Neither purely practical nor purely ceremonial, but finding the harmony between." She smiled, a genuine expression that had become increasingly common in their private moments. "You learn quickly, human boy." "I have a good teacher," he replied. The term, human boy, had evolved from an initial dismissal to something closer to an endearment, though neither acknowledged this shift explicitly. As the one-year anniversary of Jace's arrival on Aurelian Prime approached, Imperial protocol dictated a formal reassessment of the consort bond. Traditionally, this was a mere formality, a reaffirmation of the political arrangement with perhaps minor adjustments to the terms based on changing circumstances. But in the wake of the attempted coup and the growing movement for reform, this particular anniversary took on greater significance. Rumors circulated throughout the Imperial court that Lord Levian and Commander Rivana might use the occasion to propose substantial changes to the consort system as a whole. The night before the ceremony, Jace and Rivana sat together on the balcony of their shared quarters, watching the twin suns of Aurelian Prime sink toward the horizon in their perpetual dance. A year ago, they had been strangers, forced together by circumstance. Now, they moved comfortably in each other's space, their initial hostility transformed into something neither had anticipated. "Tomorrow will change many things," Rivana observed, her luminescent eyes reflecting the sunset's colors. "The Council expects us to simply reaffirm the traditional bond with minor adjustments." "And what do you want to do?" Jace asked, studying her profile. At 18, he had grown taller over the past year, though still not matching her Zelothi height. His experiences had matured him as well. The naive colony boy, now tempered by politics, danger, and the complexities of an interspecies relationship. Rivana turned to face him fully. "A year ago, I would have sought any opportunity to dissolve this bond. I saw it as a chain, binding me to a human child for political convenience." "And now?" Jace asked quietly. "Now I see differently," she admitted. "You have shown courage, wisdom, and honor that would be respected even among the Zelothi. Our forced beginning does not dictate our future path." Jace's heart quickened at her words. "Are you saying you want to maintain the bond?" "I am saying," Rivana replied carefully, "that what began as obligation has become choice. We have an opportunity tomorrow to reshape not just our arrangement, but potentially the relationship between our peoples. The question is, what do you want, Jace, Rowan, Levian?" It was a profound question, one that Jace had been considering for months as their relationship evolved. The answer, when it came, felt both surprising and inevitable. I want a partnership, he said. Not a political arrangement where one of us is bound to the other, but a true alliance between equals. And I want it to be a model for others. Proof that humans and Zolothi can choose to stand together, rather than being forced by ancient protocols. Rivanna's expression softened, the crystalline quality of her features catching the last light of the setting suns. Then we are of one mind in this, as we have increasingly been in other matters. Together, they drafted a proposal that would transform not just their personal bond, but the entire consort system. Rather than a unilateral dissolution or a simple reaffirmation, they would suggest a voluntary partnership structure, one that honored the historical importance of the bonds while creating a path toward more equitable and chosen alliances in the future. The Grand Convocation Hall was filled to capacity the following day. Representatives from all 12 human houses and their Zolothi counterparts gathered to witness what many expected to be a traditional reaffirmation ceremony. Chancellor Marquez presided, with Elder Saran representing the Zolothi interests. Jace and Rivanna entered together, their formal attire complementary but distinct, each honoring their own cultural heritage while incorporating elements of the other's traditions. The murmurs that swept through the assembly suggested that this visual statement had not gone unnoticed. Chancellor Marquez began the proceedings with traditional formality. We gather to witness the first anniversary assessment of the consort bond between Lord Jace Rowan Levian of House Levian and Commander Rivanna of the 3rd Zolothi Fleet. According to Imperial Protocol, the bond may now be formally reaffirmed with such adjustments as the parties and Council deem appropriate. He turned to Jace. Lord Levian, as the representative of House Levian, you may speak first regarding the status of the bond. Jace stepped forward, his posture confident but not arrogant, a balance he had learned from watching Rivanna over the past year. Honored representatives of the Empire, I stand before you not just as Lord Levian, but as someone who has undergone a profound journey since arriving on Aurelian Prime 1 year ago. He glanced at Rivanna, drawing strength from her presence. I came here as a colony boy thrust unwillingly into nobility, bound by protocol to a consort who equally did not choose this arrangement. Today, I stand before you as someone transformed by that very relationship which neither of us wanted. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as Jace continued. The traditional purpose of the consort bond was to create stability between our peoples in the aftermath of conflict. To that end, it has served admirably. But true stability cannot rest on foundations of obligation and unwilling service. Real strength comes from choice, from mutual respect, from alliance freely given. He turned to face Rivanna directly. Commander Rivanna has taught me more than I can express about honor, duty, and the warrior's path. She has protected me, guided me, and ultimately respected me. Not because protocol demanded it, but because we found common ground through shared challenges and values. Taking a deep breath, Jace delivered the proposal they had crafted together. Therefore, I do not simply seek to reaffirm the consort bond in its traditional form. Instead, I offer something new, a dissolution of the obligatory bond, replaced immediately by a partnership of equals, entered into by mutual choice rather than ancient decree. Gasps and exclamations filled the hall. Chancellor Marquez looked stunned, while Elder Saran's eyes gleamed with what might have been approval. This is unprecedented, Marquez sputtered. The consort bonds are foundational to our alliance structure. To dissolve one voluntarily, not to end it, Jace clarified, but to transform it, to move from obligation to choice, from the past to the future. He extended his hand toward Rivanna. If Commander Rivanna chooses to accept, all eyes turned to the Zolothi commander as she stepped forward. Her luminescent gaze swept the assembly before settling on Jace. When I was awakened from stasis 1 year ago, I found myself bound to a human boy I had never met. For political purposes I had not chosen. I was angry. I felt dishonored. She moved closer to Jace, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed hall. But, in the time since, I have witnessed courage, intelligence, and integrity that would be respected in any Zolothi warrior. I have seen a willing student become a capable fighter. I have watched a colony mechanic adapt to imperial politics with surprising skill. A hint of a smile touched her lips. Most importantly, I have seen a person who values others above himself, who offered his life for mine when he could have escaped, who sought to understand my culture rather than impose his own. These are not the actions of someone I am obligated to tolerate. These are the actions of someone I would choose to stand beside. She accepted Jace's outstretched hand, a public display of connection that sent another wave of murmurs through the assembly. I accept Lord Levian's proposal. Let the obligatory bond be dissolved, and in its place, let us forge a partnership of choice, one that might serve as a model for the future of human-Zolothi relations. Elder Saran stepped forward from his position among the Zolothi officials. This is wisdom, the elder pronounced. Our peoples have moved beyond the suspicions and wounds that necessitated the original bonds. It is fitting that our methods of alliance evolve as well. Chancellor Marquez looked less convinced, but as the Assembly's response grew increasingly positive, he recognized the shifting political winds. If this is the will of both parties, and appears to have support from both human and Zolothi representatives, the Council will consider the proposal. What followed was several hours of intense discussion as the legal and political implications were debated. Throughout it all, Jace and Rivana stood united, addressing concerns and explaining their vision for a new kind of partnership, one based on mutual respect and voluntary association rather than obligation. By day's end, a historic decision had been reached. The traditional consort bond between House Levian and the Zolothi Imperium would indeed be dissolved, replaced by a new form of alliance that would serve as a template for future relations. Other consort pairs would be given the opportunity to transition to this new model if both parties agreed. As the twin sons of Aurelian Prime began their descent once more, Jace and Rivana stood on the ceremonial balcony of the Imperial Spire, looking out over the capital city. Below them, news of the day's events was spreading rapidly, with early reactions suggesting widespread approval from both human and Zolothi populations. We have changed the Empire today, Rivana observed, her voice containing a note of wonder, rarely heard from the stoic commander. We've taken the first step, Jace corrected. Change doesn't happen in a single ceremony. She turned to him, studying his face with those luminescent eyes that had once regarded him with disdain, but now held something much warmer. When did you become so wise, human boy? Jace smiled. I had a good teacher. In a gesture that would have been unthinkable a year ago, Rivana reached out to touch his face gently. And I, it seems, had a worthy student. As the final light of the twin suns bathed them in gold and blue, Jace, Rowan Levian, and Commander Rivana stood together on the balcony, no longer consort and lord bound by obligation, but partners united by choice, respect, and the beginning of something neither had expected when their journeys first intersected. Behind them, the Imperial Spire gleamed in the fading light, a symbol of what their peoples had built together. Before them stretched the future, uncertain but full of possibility, like the stars now appearing in the darkening sky above Aurelian Prime. Two people from different worlds, brought together by ancient protocols but united by their own choices. Their story had only just begun.